Tips from Trestle is brought to you by eMenu Choice Point of Sale, Wizox AI, and Benny Keith Foods. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality Podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. My goal for this podcast: educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By bringing the resident and customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. In this episode of Tips from Trestle, I'm sharing with you an amazing conversation that I had on a recent Cocktails and Conversations back in November. Stephanie Muskat is an award-winning registered clinical social worker and psychotherapist. Prior to transitioning to private practice full-time, Stephanie worked in acute care and mental health research at several major hospitals in the Greater Toronto area. Her work is focused on caregivers and their aging loved ones. She has been featured on numerous television networks and radio shows and has presented at numerous universities and public events to raise awareness about mental health and mental health support. Stephanie has also acted as a primary caregiver to several family members and brings her personal experiences to her work with clients. Stephanie has a strengths-based, non-judgmental approach focused on empowerment, positive growth, and change. She believes that our daily experiences in life are an interplay between ourselves, the systems that surround us, and how we have been impacted by our experiences from childhood to the present moment. She is also the host of Caregivers Compass with Stephanie Muskat, an uplifting and inspirational podcast talking about all things caregiving. So let's get into this conversation with Stephanie about seasonal depression and how we can support our caregivers, residents, and loved ones with it as we go through this holiday season. Stephanie, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I wish I could smoke a drink like that. It's amazing.
It's a lot of fun. I don't do it as often as I would like. But so let's just dive right in. Obviously, you've spent a lot of your career working with family caregivers. You were a caregiver yourself. And so when you think about getting into the fall and winter, we're talking about the seasonal changes and how that impacts us. What are the first signs that caregivers might be experiencing seasonal depression versus kind of that typical stress of being a caregiver?
So I think first I want to say, obviously, I don't diagnose people, so I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but what I will say is I definitely see trends in my practice with people. So I work one-on-one with caregivers in my practice. That's all I do now. And there are a few signs that we see, namely, if there's no change in what's going on with the caregiving, if there's no change in the person they're caring for, because if that's happening, we know that maybe it's that and not the seasonal. But if everything's pretty status quo, what I would pretty much see is an increase in sadness, not wanting to get out of bed, not wanting to get out of the house. Maybe someone wants to sleep more, or they're having difficulty sleeping at night, but then they're wanting to sleep during the day, not acting like themselves, wanting to isolate more, and just following that trajectory and routine over time. Usually when we see a trend, but it's short-lived, we might not call it something, but if it's longer-lived, then we might point to, okay, maybe this is a result of something like seasonal depression.
Caregivers have this high risk of burnout. They're typically burning the candle at both ends, right? They're caring for themselves, sometimes their own family and their loved one all at the same time. And so this is year-round for them. But how does seasonal affective disorder confound these challenges that they face on a regular basis? Especially when you think about maybe they're caring for someone with dementia or some chronic illnesses, and those are just constantly on their plate.
Yeah, so if we see our ability to care and our energy levels like something like this water bottle, so if this whole water bottle is how much availability we have to care, then what seasonal affective disorder can do is it reduces the amount that we have. So then it might look more like something like this mug, right? So if we're playing with a smaller container of energy, then we have a lot less room to play with. So if we might typically have more space to do more things or care for more or less sleep, or maybe we're not taking as much care of ourselves, maybe we need less exercise, we might not need to do all of the things, suddenly we have a lot less to play with. And we don't want to fill that cup with too much too quickly, because then we're full of water much faster than if we were with this water bottle. So it just gives us a lot less of a container to deal with. The one you might see in that situation is that you're needing to do more for yourself in order to feel less depleted. And if you don't have the space and capacity and time, because a lot of times caregivers don't, then what ends up happening is you feel much more angry easily, you feel frustrated easily, you don't want to do it. You might push against that, you might feel trapped. Again, that's when that sadness comes in, and it's a lot harder to manage and balance those emotions.
You just gave, this is your standard cup, and now that shortening of it is, I think, such a great way for us to visualize that and to think about it, because sometimes it can be hard to manage the emotion or to gauge those emotions when you're looking at someone and they look like everything is fine and they're acting like everything is fine. And when you are thinking about the caregiver as a person and you see them or feel like maybe they're struggling with their own seasonal depression, how can that impact the quality of the care they're providing? And what does the trickle down look like, especially maybe for a caregiver who is in the senior living community? This is their primary job. And so they're doing this full time.
Right. Yeah. So I think that when someone is dealing with a seasonal depression and they don't have as much space, they might be less able to show up in the way that maybe they could at another time of the year, unless they put more into their day, which, as we know, is very hard and difficult to do. So it's not just something that's automatically happening. I will talk about that later, though, because we can preemptively plan for these types of things. Yeah. But what that might look like is being more removed, being more reserved. Someone might need to take more breaks, or you might see them go off into the corner more in communication. Maybe they're just not willing to enter those conversations with residents the way that they would normally want to, or with their peers. They're just more closed off and not really looking like themselves necessarily. And we might look at that and say, oh, they're lazy. Or we might look at that and say, this person is usually on what's happening with them. But it could very well be a seasonal depression.
I find that when people start to show those signs, that the first reaction is, I got to cover up for this, or I got to cover my tracks a little bit. I don't want people to see that there's more on my plate because of what I'm experiencing. Or is it more of a gradual into it? What's that look like at the starting stages?
So my answer is it depends. It depends on the person, and it depends who they are. Some people might try to cover it up initially, but that only lasts for so long, frankly, if you're not doing anything to mitigate it. People who just can't, they don't have as much self-awareness, or they're not able to mask it as much. And I think we all know that person who seems to be so happy, and then all of a sudden you find out that, oh, they're going on a 3-month leave. Why are you going on a leave? You seemed so happy. Actually, I've been dealing with this thing behind the scenes. And then there's some other people where you're talking to them and everything seems like a sudden drastic change.
Well, I'll use my family as an example. There's very much the diversity of introverted versus extroverted. Even in my own nuclear family of 4, does it show up differently based on those kinds of personality types, or is it a general same kind of malaise that you see for people?
No, it does show up differently. And I don't actually know if it's a introverted versus extroverted thing. It might be a how do you adapt from your personality, or how are you adapting based off of your childhood and how you're approaching life situations. Some of us were brought up in households where we had to learn to mask for different reasons as a result of different stressors. Maybe emotions were not permitted in the household. Some people, I think we've all heard of fight or flight or freeze. So some people actually respond to stress by freezing. So they shut down. And a lot of times they're not aware that they're doing that. And so all of a sudden they just won't have, like, that's the person where you might say, hey, how's it going? And they're like, hi. And then they walk away. Some people might have this adrenaline, which is the flight. They want to run away. And so they might be more jumpy and antsy. And so it really is dependent, I think, more on adaptation skills and how people are brought up, mixed with personality.
I never really thought about it as not the personality, but more about like the environment and their experiences. Do you find that it differs with age?
Yes, it can also differ with age for sure. And it differs with experience. And so age and experience play a factor. I think that some people, unfortunately, we all know there's people with age who they have given up on life and they're like, I can't handle anymore, or I can only handle bits of things. And then there's other people who say, you know what, my life has gone this way and I don't want to live my life like that. And so I'm going to go the other way. And it's hard to foresee what that might be like until the person gets there.
There's so many factors that I would have never thought about that can go into that. So it's fascinating to hear you talk about all of those pieces of the puzzle when some people might just think it's a one thing, like the introvert, extrovert, or whatever. So
there are many factors. Yeah. So
thinking about that, and as far as there's so many different ways that it can impact, so many different ways that it can, we look at supporting caregivers, whether that's a family caregiver or a professional caregiver. What are a few strategies that we can help them implement when it's the winter time, they're starting darker out, so we're starting to feel all of that? Because we want to protect their mental health. You're a big proponent of self-care in your work. And so how can we support them do that?
Technology continues to drive changes in senior care, and that includes food service. eMenu Choice is an award-winning point-of-service application for managing the dining function in senior living communities. This mobile, touchscreen-enabled software enhances the dining experience for residents while streamlining processes for staff. The flexibility and functionality of eMenu Choice makes it an effective solution for any type of senior living environment, from independent and assisted living to skilled nursing facilities. It works for production kitchens or restaurant-style service with options for per meal or a la carte pricing, and accommodates a variety of payments, including bill to account, meal credits, and credit cards. Created by a senior care provider with more than a century of experience serving older adults, eMenu Choice eliminates communication barriers between staff and residents while enabling person-centered choices and greater resident satisfaction. eMenu Choice, transforming dining for senior living.
Yeah, so this is what I was alluding to before about preemptively planning. So if a caregiver knows that they have some sort of a seasonal depression, or they tend to get seasonal depression, which we know at this point. I think we've been around enough years to know if that's the category we fall into. My husband definitely falls into the category of seasonal sadness, for example. He knows. We have to preemptively be aware because it's going to happen, right? And so what can we do to preemptively be aware? So there's a few things. One is, and I think at this point, a lot of people have heard of this, a sad lamp. So this is a lamp. They used to sell them at Costco. I don't know if they do, but Amazon. Essentially what it is, it's a lamp that you can sit in front of for a certain amount of time a day, like half an hour or 20 minutes. It will say on the instructions. And it's supposed to mimic sunlight. And so if you're not getting a certain amount of sunlight, it's supposed to actually help with the amount of sunlight you're getting to improve your mood. And it does improve your mood for sure. So some people will put it in their bathroom, and when they're getting ready for the day, they might sit in front of it or stand in front of it, and that can help a lot. So that's one thing. The other thing is a lot of people tend to stop going outside in winter months, especially I live in Canada, and where I'm at, it can get very cold and it gets very dark very early here. Like it's already getting dark and it's 4:25 p.m. people stop going outside because they think, okay, I get to work, it's dark, and I leave work and it's dark. You got to get outside. Like, it's really important that you get fresh air, that you still get out. Just because it's not the summer doesn't mean you can't get outside. So doing those things are really important. And then people think of self-care as, I've got to go to the spa, I have to go on vacation. That's not what we mean. We mean really small moments in time where you're present with yourself. So that could mean making sure that you're having your cup of coffee while it's hot in the morning without a distraction, because we love to distract ourselves when we're feeling overwhelmed and feeling sad. Social media, our phones, we all do things like that. So it means, how do you stay present even for 5 minutes during the day? Journaling is really effective and helpful, identifying your feeling and emotion. And then a big thing is identifying where in your body you feel stress. And this is one that I love to work with my clients on, because our body tells us when things are coming up. Our body tells us when we're starting to feel sad. Our body tells us when we're starting to feel anxious. And we may not be aware of it. So it might be something that someone has to learn, either with a professional or some other way. But our body really gives us signals. Just like when you're getting sick, you get signals. So by knowing what those signals are, we can better prepare. Oh, okay, this is happening. So I know I have to bring in my interventions, right? So for me, when I'm starting to feel really anxious, I get this feeling from my stomach that passes all the way up to my throat. And I know, okay, I'm starting to feel anxious. So maybe I need to pull back here a little bit. Maybe I'm going to say no to this social event tonight. But it's preparation, I think, a lot more than acting on. Because once you're already going down the path towards burnout or depression, it's a lot harder to get out than it is to prepare and not go in, if that makes sense.
It's many follow-up questions to everything you just said.
Okay. And that's the things.
But it's all great information. So I guess two things that I just want to dig in a little bit more on. The first one is, you talked about learning how to feel in your body, where that comes from. I know I struggle sometimes with that, trying to figure out, like, is this allergies, or is this like feeling it, or is this like that, like emotional or physical response to the emotional side of things? So how can we get better at recognizing those signs and signals our bodies are giving us?
People might not like this answer, but the first step in all of this, honestly, is to start doing mindfulness body scans. And if people haven't heard of that, essentially what that is, and there's a lot of recordings online and there's a lot of apps that do this, but it's essentially sitting with yourself in silence with your eyes closed or looking down, and actually going through each part of your body one by one and just objectively seeing how you're feeling in every part of your body, and identifying if there's any tension, if there's any pain, if there's any soreness. That's step number one. And again, there's a lot of different ways you can do that. And from there, taking it up a notch, the next level would be really learning to tune in to the feeling that you have. So for example, if you're doing a body scan and you feel tension in your jaw, it's about, okay, now I'm going to sit with my jaw and I'm going to actually start to process and look through, what is it telling me? What's going on? And it's a step-by-step process. But if you're asking me, there's different ways to do this. This is just my opinion. My opinion is you start with body scans. That's a pretty good gauge. In the morning, you can do a body scan. It can take 2 minutes. And then, oh, wait a second, today I actually feel a lot tighter here than I did yesterday. This might be telling me that I have stress. And you're your own best expert. So I think we start questioning ourselves because we're not aware, and we distract ourselves. That's really what it is. I think when you start to like miss things, it's, I have a pain, but it must be this, but I don't know. Let's go do on the next thing. Versus if we really focus in on ourselves, we start to learn to trust ourselves and be able to identify what the things are that we're feeling. And then you don't even need to do the body scans all the time once you become aware. Like, I'll get feelings and I know right away what it is. But that's after many years of practice, I guess.
For me, it sounds like a very straightforward process. And the fact that it's 2 minutes or 3 minutes of your day, I think maybe that's where people lose sight of it, right? Like, at first I hear you say that and I go, man, that's like a 30-minute process. Like, where do I find the time for that? But I love the fact that you're saying it. Really, no, it's like the more you do it, you can really get it down to just make it a part of that 30 minutes of getting ready in the morning process for your day.
Yeah. And again, the mistake people make, I think, is that they're reactive. So they only do it when they feel like something is wrong versus proactive of I'm going to prepare. So maybe let me have this as part of my routine. Now, listen, I don't do this all the times. I'm not going to pretend that I do. But ideally, you're doing it in a preparation manner, not a reactive manner, because it is harder to deal with that once you're already there than it is if you're preparing for it.
So the second question I had was, you talked about getting out, connecting, and getting more sunlight. How does that work when you're in a family dynamic or a social dynamic where people aren't experiencing the seasonal depression and they don't need that? They're perfectly fine that it's dark at 4 o'clock. They're like, great, that means I could stay inside and I could be on my computer or I can read a book and don't have to deal with the world. So how do you make that a part of your daily routine if you need it, but others in your life don't?
I think it's about differentiating that your needs are not the same as other people's needs. I think it's about knowing that somebody else who might not need to go outside, which I'm gonna question that one a little bit. We all could benefit from movement. If we look at any research, it says that, and vitamin D and the sun and all of those really important. But if someone feels like they need it more than another person, it's about identifying that your needs are different than other people, even in the same family unit. And just because somebody else doesn't need it doesn't mean that you don't need it.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I appreciate that. That was just a thought I had. Like, I'm fortunate that I'm the one who'll just, if I need it, I'll do it. So I don't have to worry.
Yeah.
It takes a little bit of, I don't want to say selfishness, maybe self-awareness to think, okay, I probably should get outside, or I probably do need to make sure the windows in my office are open so I get some sunlight in.
Yeah. And some people might say, I can't, like in a family caregiver situation, I can't leave the person. You expect me to go outside. And my answer to that is, if they can go with you, it's not ideal, but they can also benefit from having fresh air. So can you bundle them up, get them in, if they're in a wheelchair or in a situation where they can? If you can't, that's a different story. You might need to figure something else out. But if you can take them with you, put in some earbuds, listen to a podcast or music or something, again, if they're safe in the environment to do, and that way you're having your own time, but they're there. But then you're not just saying, I can't get out because they're with me. We have to often work on creative approaches to get people outside, because being inside all the time just is not good for us.
Yeah, that's a great point. I haven't even thought about just including the person you're taking care of as a part of it and the benefits for them, maybe helping them avoid the seasonal depression as well.
Right. Yeah.
Obviously, we're talking to senior living professionals here today about all of this. When they look at the family caregivers that they support that are a part of their community, or the caregivers in their community, what can they do to really truly build an environment that is supportive of all of those different people and personalities and needs for their community?
I feel the answer to this question is pretty easy, and it's that family caregivers, but I'm sure it passes on to non-family caregivers. One of the main things they say is that they just want to be acknowledged and as part of a team. So if a family caregiver is coming in to visit, or if it's the professional caregiver, acknowledging them, just saying, how are you, is important, or just including them in conversation or making sure that you see them is just as important to a family caregiver than anything. It's the difference between them coming in and you just saying and then walking away. That will make them feel like they're not part of anything, that they're not important, maybe that you're mad at them, that they should feel guilty about having the person they care for in a facility, versus, hi, how are you doing? It's so good to see you. That took how many seconds? So that really does make a difference. It also allows the space for these people to be able to open up to us. It gives them that feeling of camaraderie, that feeling of, oh, this is maybe somebody that I can trust. So if there is something going on, I can open up to them and tell them if something is happening.
For over a century, Benny Keith has been a trusted leader in the food service industry. As a broadline distributor, we offer an extensive selection of products, delivering to 21 states through 10 distribution centers. We can help you create a thriving culinary culture by pairing quality products with customized solutions that elevate your residents' dining experience. Our team of registered dietitians provide unmatched customer service by modifying menus, selecting recipes, ensuring regulatory compliance, and more. Quality, value, and service are at the heart of everything we do. Benny Keith Foods puts the care back in healthcare.
For anyone who maybe is new to mindfulness exercises or thinks about them in a different light, do you have suggestions for how we could reframe that idea for them or shift their perspective without pressuring, just to give them a little bit of a different view of how it can be beneficial? I'm speaking from experience because I was one of the people. I for such a long time, I was like, mindfulness, breathing, I can't do that. I'm not doing it right, or I feel uncomfortable. And I was just always in my brain. And I have since then grown into it. But and I just wanted to see if you had thoughts on how to, maybe what language to use, or how we can maybe connect it to something that they already do so that it doesn't seem like an extra thing, or that it's not something that have to you get used to. Suggestions?
Yeah. And that's a really good question. I hear that a lot. And that's why I hesitate to say anything to do with meditation, because people think about meditation and they're like, oh, do not tell me that. That's ridiculous. And there's a lot of different ways, again, that we can become present with the body. This is just the easiest one to do it when you're on your own. Like, I use a lot of different techniques in my practice with clients one-on-one, but again, when you're on your own. Something you can say that has nothing to do with breathing and that type of stuff, because you're right, there is perception about that, is you can say, okay, when you're going for a walk anyway, can you focus on how your feet are touching the ground? So like going from the front of your foot to the back of your foot, like how your foot's rolling. Or can you pay attention to the sounds that are outside? Can you pay attention to what you're seeing? Because again, we all live in this mode these days where we're staring at our phone. And even when we're walking down the street, we'll be like, yeah, we're going to take a break now. We're going to take a walk. And then you're spending 20 minutes staring at your phone. You're not present at all with what you're doing. You have no awareness of your body whatsoever. So absolutely, if someone is not open to that type of conversation, rephrase it. Can you just listen? Can you just be aware? Look at the tree. Did you know there was a tree there? Because I bet you didn't. Focus on how your foot is. Focus on how your legs feel. Focus on what your arms are doing. That's another way that we can bring presence to the body without saying mindfulness breathing. But that's also allowing someone to be present, because what actually happens when you do that is they might start to say, oh, wow, like I had this feeling in my leg that I didn't know was there because I wasn't paying attention to it. And now all of a sudden I'm realizing that. Or, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that the leaves were changing on that tree. That's so beautiful. Or I'm realizing that I feel really sad all of a sudden, and I didn't know that my sadness was there. And then I started to cry. So that's another way of phrasing it. And again, there's books and there's all sorts of things, but the easiest thing is the mindfulness type of listening that you can do for 2 minutes.
So to build on that, what typically are obstacles or roadblocks for people to even think that's something they should do? What causes people to think that being more mindful about how they feel or how they approach things, what causes that? And it's probably a whole nother conversation, but
that's a layered conversation for sure. But a lot of times it starts with, there's nothing wrong with me. Why would I even start to look into myself? A lot of time people have an emotional wall up. So they don't want to go there. They can't be vulnerable. They don't want to know what's inside. Because when we're focusing on our body, or we're focusing on what's going on and what we're feeling, you're likely to have feelings come up. It just goes with it. And there are a lot of people out there who were never taught how to deal with feelings. There are people out there who were taught that having feelings are not okay. Most people ages 25 and onward were taught, don't have feelings. What are you crying about? What are you doing? It comes from the home early on. And feeling can be very scary. So a lot of times people push against that until they can't push against them anymore because they're not functioning. And that's usually when they come to me because they're like, I'm not okay anymore.
I used to not think about how the first 20 years of my life impacted the second 20 years of my life until I got into the most recent 8 years after the first 40 and started being a little more mindful about, oh, I remember that happening and I remember that environment. I remember being in that situation and how starting to connect the dots. It's better to come to it later than never.
And there are people who come to it never. And there are people I see that come to see me when they're in their 90s. I have a 93-year-old that just started seeing me and they're like, I actually have never looked at my emotions ever. And they're starting, it's really scary. Like when you start to talk to a therapist and you're talking about your in-depth feelings, and I'm, for lack of a better word, forcing you to let your guard down and go to that scary place. Imagine being 93 and having 93 years of stuff that you're starting to unpack. But people do it at that age.
It makes me curious because one of the things we didn't talk about is the impact of the seasonal depression on the seniors in our communities, the people we're taking care of.
Yeah.
Is there a lot of, I imagine the foundational stuff you talked about is similar, but how does that maybe impact how caregivers who are, maybe they're able to handle it, they've gone through all of these things and they're like, I know how to take care of my own, but now I've got to figure out how to help my loved one or the person taking care of deal with theirs.
Oh, it's really hard, especially if you're dealing with a form of a dementia where they can't verbalize or maybe what feeling is expressed in behavior. It's very hard to figure out what's going on. If I talk about my own mom who had dementia, in the winter months, it was nearly impossible to get her outside. She needed to be Hoyer lifted into a wheelchair. She needed to go down a ramp. If there was snow outside, forget it. Like she wouldn't let you put on a coat, all sorts of things. She couldn't express what the issues were. And so but then when she would go out in the summer, she was just a happier person. So I think in that perspective, it's like you can only do what you can do, right? You can't make it unsafe for both of you at the same time. You're not going to strap someone down and say, you're getting that lease on. I don't think it's going to help. So I think it's a balance for sure. But at the same time, of course, you're probably dealing with that. But it is complicated because the communication can be impacted or they might not have insight into what's going on.
Yeah. Lot to unpack there. And I've been fortunate that in senior living, like connected to the residents, but not in my own life, had to deal with any of that. I can imagine the burden can be a lot for a caregiver in that situation.
For sure. 100%.
Again, Stephanie, thank you so much for being on here and sharing your expertise. And we appreciate you being a part of our conversation. So there it is, everybody. Another one in the books. Thanks again for tuning in. Please follow and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestlehospitalityconcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.